So, Mariam, thank you so much for joining us in another episode on Sci-Tech Swiss podcast. It's such a pleasure having you here.
Likewise, thank you so much for inviting me, Karina.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Yeah, likewise. I really like the background that we're having, especially, related to the theme of the podcast today. So, as a woman in
Absolutely.
tech,
We're
art,
on the same planet.
yeah, we are on the same planet today.
That's
It
right.
doesn't, it doesn't happen, every day, but, we're trying to stay, on the same planet. But because we are talking about, your amazing artwork and about so many great things that you're doing in a scientific field and in a tech field, how do you all combine them together, especially related to Holo Art and your amazing projects with NASA?
Thank you so much for the question. I think we see it as just fun. It's a playground, and we have a lot of really brilliant people coming together to uh, bring to life a sense of joy and wonder, amazement and excitement. The art and the technology really blend together with the science. So, from patented AI to virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, and um, technologies that are emerging in the quantum realm.
That's very interesting. And you were actually talking to me right before our interview about interplanetary space art. Am I right? On a collaboration with NASA.
Well, we can frame it that way, sure. So our soft launch was with NASA, the Goddard Space Flight Center. We had an astrophysicist come and speak about the James Webb Telescope that will soon be superseded by the Roman Telescope that's looking for dark matter and dark energy. We also sent art to space as creative payload aboard the SpaceX cargo mission that NASA had to the International Space Station, and that art was later beamed back down to Earth. So it's very exciting to expand our consciousness beyond Earth and apropos with our background to think about what does art and science mean when it escapes gravity? Where are we, and how does space policy, space laws, space economies impact everything here on Earth?
Which ones are your favorite artists or favorite astronauts that you actually admire yourself?
That's a tough question. I think, I have a number of artists that have influenced the way that I engage with the art world. One of them is Basquiat. Part of my question, the reason why I named him, was to think about how are we cultivating the next generation of Basquiats. When there's an increase in arts funding cuts, the arts funding is uh, almost non-existent now in our educational systems around the world. There's a focus on STEM, so science, technology, engineering, math, and that's why we have a team of engineers and mathematicians and astrophysicists and creative technologists, but we also include art into that, so to turn STEM into STREAM, to include resilience, recreation, reading, and art. And this provides whole brain thinking, the ability to really maximize our capacity as human beings and help move beyond where we see ourselves potentially as Homo sapiens into Homo interpretans, into Homo digitalis, into, as some people have expressed, future cyborgs. We have an artist who has a brain computer implant, BCI, brain computer interface, so a neural implant, and he creates art with his thoughts. We have an artist who was formerly a quantum physicist and worked in the lab with Nobel laureates. So that type of art. And then we have artists in Nigeria, for example, who paint in studios that don't have reliable internet, and having this mixture and diversity. We know biodiversity is key for um, uh, homeostasis in our natural environment, and so we try to curate a community so that we can elevate that that perspective. And I think the question that you asked, why are we doing this in the education, why I named Basquiat? Well, can you imagine a modern day Basquiat who's a female? I have a piece that was created over the weekend. I'm happy to share it with you. And the question becomes, how do we foster creativity in the next generation of artists? And how do we elevate the role of artists from typically being at the periphery over the past millennia as, creating art pieces with patronages, right? There were patrons during the Renaissance. The Sistine Chapel was painted by somebody who really didn't want to paint the Sistine Chapel. He was working on a huge sculpture of a horse, but given wartime efforts, they needed the materials, and so he had to stop. And all of this is tied together with technology, economy, and that's where it gets really interesting with decentralized finance, Web3, and emerging technologies. And so it's really creating the evolution of art. How do we evolve art with technology? And for me, Holo Art exemplifies a collective effort where people aren't working independently in the studio anymore on their own. It's not just one artist creating a piece of work. It's artists coming together with scientists to create art over time consistently.
What are certain trends and predictions, in your opinion, that will survive in 2024?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Thank you. I think
interesting question.
I think it depends on lines of sight. So you spoke about 2024. I think we're going to see there's a backlash. So as far as I can tell, there's a number of different perspectives in terms of the future of art and AI. And so the trends that we're seeing is, movie houses, for example, shutting down. I don't know if you saw recently, there was a large investment that was frozen in terms of creating movies because some of the new technologies create redundancies. We also have children who are becoming digital natives and they're digitally literate. However, there isn't uniform digital access across the world. So we're having, some children become very adept at working in VR environments. And so it becomes very natural for them to create there. And then we have others who don't have access. So access and literacy becomes an issue in 2024. In terms of the trends that we're looking at, some of it is under our creative and scientific IP. So I invite you to follow us and stay in touch for some of our releases later this year. The biggest one is incorporating cutting edge science. So what we're engaged in, Karina, is art that has never been done before. It's global firsts. Nobody else has had access to create art with this patented technology, with some of the quantum science and the pioneering way of, I guess you can think about it like this. If art is a recipe and you have a chef in the kitchen who's putting the recipe together, and you have a sous chef, and you have, the saucier, and you have everybody set up, and you have a process and a flow. How do we create and innovate the cake making process? How do we create a new cake? How do we have multiple chefs in multiple kitchens around the world working together for a global cake? And that's kind of what we're doing. And so the recipe, we're trying different things, and it's a little bit of design thinking, it's a little bit of systems thinking, it's a lot of frustration and challenges, but there's all these beautiful successes and fascinating discoveries. And so we're positioning ourselves as a creative lab where art and science meet for exponential innovation.
Become a part of the fastest growing world-class podcast of all time, Sci-Tech Swiss. With over 100,000 monthly views, Sci-Tech Swiss is making waves in the world of podcasting. Karina, over to you.
Become a sponsor for the next episode or reproduce one for you in our professional studio. Find us on premierswissmedia.com. So moving on with our conversation about digital art and the impact of art, I would also like to ask you more questions about any kind of use case that you like to share with us, and maybe any kind of collaboration with digital twin, or we talked about artificial intelligence, about blockchain, and how do you scale these kind of technologies, how you blend them in the process of creating art?
That's another great question, Karina. I think what we're doing is really avant-garde in the sense that everybody we meet says nobody in the world is doing this, and you have no competitors. And the reason for this is because we've curated a top-class, world-class team, and it's the team. It's the people. It's, our artist who teaches sacred geometry, who projected her art on the moon. It's our artist who presented at Art Basel, Hong Kong, using Neuro technology and EEG to create values collectively on trust, integrity, truth, wisdom, beauty, and then selling that art on the blockchain so that the values that you have are for sale. It's a meta process. It's our, artist in Japan working on multiple media. So from digital to photography to film to print, and bringing all of these people together, looking at scaling. I think there's a thirst and there's a hunger for really beautiful art that moves beyond Bored Ape, beyond club art. And I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I just remember when that trend was actually a hype in 2021. It was actually 3 years ago. And I didn't understand it myself. I was like, what's happening? What's this?
Well, I was in the room in Clubhouse where it started as a joke. And, people were asking, do you want to join? I was thinking, I don't know. It seems more like a fad, like a trend, we're really bored and we have yachts.
That's why they're called bored. Yeah, bored. Yeah.
Really. And so when I speak about these things, and I'm talking about substance and long-term lines of sight, what I'm talking about here is how do we build civilization on Earth and off planet? And it's very apropos our backgrounds, because if the art that we're creating now drives our culture. I've also written an article about sex in space. If you'd like to take a look, that's another.
Okay. This conversation is getting interesting. Okay.
Okay, I thought you might like that, but I'm not sure if I can speak about it. So it's available on.
Sure, you can. I'm really. I mean, you can even talk about it now during our podcast interview, if you'd like, of course.
Sure. I mean, the premise here is we're reimagining the future, and we're reimagining what it means to be a family. We're reimagining what it means to be healthy, and we're reimagining what it means to be human. As people go off into space, we will have, people trying to be the first to have a space baby. To look at how astronauts will survive long-term missions when they're far away from families. How will they maintain a sense of equilibrium and psychological safety and love and warmth through technology, through VR, through art, through certain therapies? Yet there'll be a need for future space colonies to reimagine how families are curated. And when we come back to the systemic element of, chaos theory, complexity theory, if we launch something because we think it's a brilliant business idea and we see exponential profits, do we think about what that will mean in 5 years' time? For example, NVIDIA, microchips, we have all of this tied to mining industries in Africa, and they're tied to the communities there. So iron, ore, nickel, lithium, all of the things that we use for our cell phones, which are, replaced every few years, for our laptops, which are replaced every few years. What happens to this technology? It's not a circular economy. We're extracting more and we're running out. And so we say, let's go off into space and find more. Why? So that we can do exactly what we did on Earth up in space. It makes no sense. So the way that we can mitigate that and we can manage that risk is to look at how do we improve our behavior here on Earth, or how can we reimagine our behavior in space so that in 10 years' time we don't have satellites exploding and creating a cloud where future generations could no longer look up at the sky and see stars. It'll all be in VR. That's really heartbreaking for me. For millennia, humanity has been able to look up into the sky and be inspired. And so when we speak about, for example, sex in space, I know it's sexy and it's a luring topic, but the premise there is really beyond sex. It's really looking at fecundity levels on Earth. In Japan, we have pillows with arms because people want to feel like they're with somebody, but we also have kissing classes for adults who have not had a chance to learn how to kiss. Why? The question becomes why. Technology keeps us in our little bubbles. We're addicted to our phones. We're addicted to our epistemic bubbles of algorithmic feeds. In China, they now have, in some companies, as a perk, days specifically for you to date. So that's a way of attracting workers to say, because people don't have time anymore. And when we look at human labor in a post-industrial environment, we're looking at extraction. What can we get from people in the smallest amount of time with the highest profitability? This is where we see burnout. This is where we see mental health issues. This is where we see organizations coming out with scandal after scandal, because there's been a loss of the ethics and the morality and what makes us human, what makes us thrive. There are certain companies that are succeeding. And so my wish and my hope is that we look at those companies, and I hope Holo is one of them, where we value family time. We don't push, we ask people, don't work on the weekends, take time off, of course, if we have specific projects. And then we also look at being able to be vulnerable with what we need. So if people need a few days to take time, it comes from leaders. And if we look at the global stage, we see female leaders in New Zealand and other places who've stepped down, in Finland, right? And they've stepped down or stepped away from high profile, high pressure jobs because, and this is a trend of women executives as well, where we're seeing not just quiet quitting, but people are going back to traditional roles because there's a lack of balance. It's hard to have that family. And so when we talk about families in space, when we talk about building civilizations off planet, the question becomes, what is a future mother? What is a future father? What does a future child look like? Will they be automated cyborgs who will have implants and be perfectly calibrated and be very fit?
But also one of the questions that it really makes you think, will traditional art still be relevant at this point if we are just, in this kind of digital era?
You hit the nail on the head. That is the big question. That's really, so the impetus of Holo Art is that. The telos is that. I'm going to give you another story, if I may, with, for example, NASA. When NASA launches space missions, there's a new culture that's created. There's a new story that's written where seeds are sent to space. We also have some Holo Art space plants that you'll see in our upcoming book. We have a catalog with all of our art in space collection, our avant-garde.
Great. I'm so thrilled just about the idea.
Me too. And we're working on immersive experiences with several museums and galleries. So these are things in the works. They'll take some time because of the collaborative effort across the globe. At the same time, the story about NASA is these space seeds go up into space. They're brought back down to Earth, and then trees are planted, and they're sent around the world for people to plant trees. So this becomes one of the, stories, the cultural genesis stories that your children's grandchildren will tell once the traditional art is kind of put to the side. And one of the concerns that I have, and the reason why I work with the IEEE, is looking at when we archive the digital compendia of human knowledge, it's only what's archived that stays. So ancient wisdom, indigenous wisdom, oral histories, they're no longer, and we're working like this. We're kind of blind digitally because we don't see the full picture. We've cut out half of the world's history from our digital archives. And this brings us to tech bro culture when we spoke about, Bored Ape Yacht Club. Tech bro culture, we see it manifest right now with the billionaire race into space, with various strategies for stock manipulation with Robinhood and other things where, digital technologies become yet another medium for control, power, manipulation. And when the infrastructure is held in the arms or the hands of a very specific few, what we're creating is the next generation of empire building. This empire building is nothing new. It's been around for millennia, where people are building and building and growing. And you see all of, from models moving into, or from Disney starlets moving into modeling, moving into sitcoms, moving into makeup. Why we move into makeup is, there's a whole economy that's built around this, and it's to gain a certain sense of, I guess what I'm trying to say, let me go back, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, Karina, and just say that the reason why many artists are not recognized while they're alive, they're considered crazy. And they have a hard, and they have a hard time being understood by the context of our times. They see a little bit further ahead. I'd like to mention also Matthew Wong. He's an artist, Canadian, big. I don't know if you've seen his work. Sadly, he ended his own life.
Oh,
Pardon?
not yet. I'm so sorry. No, I didn't get to see his art, unfortunately.
Brilliant. And so the reason is to think about, how do we cultivate the next generation of artists? How many children do we have saying, I want to be an artist and I see a future as an artist? Yet we have marketing divisions, and we have influencer culture that capitalizes on the elements of art to attract eyeballs on screens, which is the impetus of technology and technology success. We measure followership, we measure, how many times somebody visited something, and so art becomes a portal, and this portal allows us to walk through into new realities. Sylvain Levy has a beautiful quote, and he's given me permission to use this, and I think you'd find it apropos to our conversation. Thinking about art that is timely and timeless. Timeless and timely. Bringing those together so that we have traditions of art history, which is, I think, what they're doing with the DSL collection, but also evolving it for the next generation so that it is relevant. It doesn't become obsolete, so that younger people can connect. And that's why we have, teenagers as part of our team. We have millennials as part of our team. It's not just a very uniform, and I think we need to have this modeled in corporations. I think every corporation should have a child on their board. I think that there should be more millennials in the room innovating, but I also think there needs to be a look at all the wisdom that elders bring. We've shifted our narrative where we ship off our elderly into old age homes. So the sense of community, the sense of how do we live together in an intentional way. And the last interesting thing right now is, I don't know if you've heard about the bunkers for ultra high net worth. A lot of people are.
Yes, I did.
Yes. So these bunkers are being created with an eye toward intentional communities and societies. How do we have, an artist, a dentist, a doctor, and we create an intentional community? My question is, do you also have an artist? Do you have a cultural, a cultural strategist? And the reason for this is, when we look at society building, when we look at the ancient, from Mayans to Mesopotamia to you name it, to the Vikings, what we have is the evolution of human thought and feeling through art with cave drawings, you know, saying, I am here, I am making a statement, I'm connecting, I'm trying to make sense of my reality and put it into visual form or musical form. And I think that's what we need to bring back into the conversation. And I'd love to see art everywhere. And you see certain countries, for example, in Taiwan, I don't know if you've seen their buses, or in Japan with the sewer grates, everything has an element of art. And so design is embedded in the DNA of the infrastructure and the architecture.
And also another question that I had, it's a question that I'm actually asking everyone. Should technology be perceived, in this case, elaborating on that, like our friend or our enemy?
Great question. I'm going to answer in two parts. One is Banksy. I love Banksy. And I think part of what that illuminates is when we think about our world, we have our environment on the outer ring. Then we had artists and cultural, you know, we had blue collar workers. And then we get closer and closer, we have technology, and then we have family offices, and then we have, you know, wealth building empires, monarchies, whatever it may be, certain governments. And so when we look at this, artists are now moving closer and closer with technologists into the middle. What Banksy did was bring that dialogue from the outer edge, from street art, from graffiti, from a different subculture, counterculture, punk culture, solar punk culture, into the mainstream. And now there's this dance where his work has become somewhat antithetical to what he started off as. If you love Banksy, I highly recommend you watch Exit Through the Gift Shop. I don't know if you've seen it. Brilliant. And I love the music. Richard Hawley, Tonight the Streets Are Ours. That's something that I think exemplifies the work that he does. The next question you had about enemy or friend in terms of technology, two answers. And the answer, the first one, is that that's a very dualistic way of looking at things. The reason why we'd like to evolve science fiction to move beyond Star Wars good and bad is ancient wisdom and principles. We have the yin and the yang, the male and the female, the good and the light and the dark. It's never just good. It's never just bad. And when we divide our language, when we divide our mental constructs into two, then we become, you know, way back into primal mentalities of your us and them, right? And this is about social psychology. Is there an enemy? Is there a friend? And so if we want to see ourselves as earthlings, if we want to see ourselves as humans on Earth, you know, working toward the same ideals, I think everybody wants to have their children thrive and be healthy and succeed. I think everybody wants to be able to hopefully achieve their full potential, to be able to do some good, to feel good when they go to bed, when they look at themselves in the mirror, when they engage with their community, that there's a cultivation of positive energy. This is where change management comes into play, Karina. Emotional contagion is real. When you're bombarded regularly with fear, with distrust. This is what's happening globally, especially with technology and AI, AGI. I have an article about the evolution of AGI. I'm happy to send you the article to attach the link if you wish. It goes into detail around how this technology can be used for good and how we can create enlightened technologies. And so we move beyond the duality of good or bad. Technology in and of itself isn't inherently evil. It's how we design it. It's how we engage with it. It's how we use it. And so we see this, for example, in Facebook. The genesis of Facebook, as you know, was to rate female college students in terms of their attractiveness. YouTube was previously called Tune In and Hook Up. It was a dating app. All of these things come from tech bro culture, the objectification of women, looking at, the evolutionary biology of procreation. And we see it manifest in, Space Wars, which is really, my rocket is bigger and faster and stronger than yours. So if we can move beyond that and reintroduce the concept of the divine feminine, I think I have a lot of hope in people like yourself and the next generation of, and I know this is a cop-out, a lot of people say the next generation, but I really do think that we're helping build a more enlightened society. And yes, technology has its pitfalls, but the more we become aware of how it's created. I gave a talk at a Microsoft conference to developers, and it was about game theory for business intelligence. And out of the 200 attendees, how many do you think were women?
I don't know, let me guess. Probably 4 or 10. No?
10. Yeah. So sorry, it was 10 to 20. I think it was 10%. 10%. And so the question becomes, I interviewed the director of innovation at a global bank here in Canada. And part of the question was, how do we promote or how do we encourage women in STEM? Because when we talk about does technology good or bad, we have some of the pitfalls where you have assassin drones that don't recognize skin color. So certain people are non-humans, right? And I don't know if you know neurosymbolic AI. There's certain ways that algorithms are weighted to be biased, and I think all of these things.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And so, there's no, and then you can go the other way. And I don't believe that we're looking at, it's not about woke culture and everything has to be, I'm not sure which word to use. I don't want to say utopic, but it doesn't have to be dystopian. It doesn't have to be utopian. It doesn't have to be dystopian, but I think we can evolve humanity so that we can find common ground.
I definitely love this conversation, and I really hope that we could have like more interesting and engaging conversation, and we could definitely use technology for good. So I definitely love it.
I so appreciate the opportunity to chat. I loved your questions, and I just want to end with, we have a patented AI corporate ecosystem. It's the next level Bugatti for only select clients. If people are interested, we have a Holo Art catalog that's coming out with some of the brightest minds in the world, including Nora Bateson, poetry, art, AI, you name it, it's in there. It's about 500 pages. We also have our first ever global portfolio of art dropping later this year, as well as a very exclusive, and I'm going to announce it first on your podcast, Karina.
Okay.
We have a quantum timepiece, and it's a quantum limited edition. There's only 10, so it's a little bit in the it's a luxury piece, and there are 10 available where we put in avant-garde quantum technology with cutting-edge art together. It's art and science. So, and then some executive education, some apps, technologies. If you're interested, please get in touch. Thank you for the opportunity, and it was a pleasure chatting with you, Karina.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that.